Hey, how's it going, everyone? Justin again, as always. Thanks for watching my channel. Welcome back. Today's topic is going to be about big jobs versus small jobs and how big jobs and small jobs can affect you differently whether you're at the dealership or the independent shop. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I wanted to fill you guys in on what's coming up this weekend. So this weekend, what I'm getting ready to share with you guys is I figured I would do a video about the various types of professional scan tools that are out there that are not only just good for professional use, but also just as good for DIY use. So you'll see some that are going to be a little bit more costly than others, and I'll share with you the differences during the weekend. So I'm not going to talk about that tonight. I'm just going to share with you real briefly the tools that we're going to cover in the video. So one of them, of course, is going to be the Innova scan tool that you can pick up from AutoZone. I believe this one is the model 3040. Comes in at around $100. We're going to talk about that. Then we have the shop favorite here, which I believe is the C-Reader 5. We're going to talk about that. I think that comes in at around 60 to 80 bucks. I'll have to take a look and get back to you guys. You guys know that I own the Solus Edge, so we're going to talk about that. There are a lot of similarities as far as features are concerned between this and the Veris, so we'll cover that during the weekend. And last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about the Maxi Cysts made from Autel that Shane let me borrow. We're going to talk about some of the added features and benefits that go with it as well. Alright, let's get back to the small jobs versus big jobs and how you're affected whether or not you work at a dealership or an independent shop. So at the dealership, when I was there, it was very competitive, like I said. Everybody was kind of in it to win it, you know, for themselves and what have you. But certainly there was a lot of favoritism, you know, between the service writer and the mechanics. There was one service writer that favored me and another guy over the rest of the shop, but that was going into like heavy line and diag. So one guy was favored by him for diag and I was favored by him for heavy line because we could get the jobs in and out and he knew he could make money off of it. So that was taken into consideration. There's also other different types of favoritism as well when it comes to like some of the gravy work at the dealership, like the flushes and the air filters and some of the easier recalls that a lot of you guys that are dealer techs are completely aware of. And then of course there's always your evaluation that they had twice a month, you know, where they would sit you down in the office with the service manager and be like, man, we need to talk about your hours, this, that, and the other, what's going on, this week you produced, but these other 2 weeks you didn't, and then this week you produced, so we're just trying to figure out how we can make this work to be more beneficial, just not for you, but for also the whole entire shop. And I think it takes that sit down with the service manager to get them to understand that warranty work doesn't always pay, especially if you're a heavy line mechanic such as myself. I've been doing heavy line and working on that grind now for, God, the last 5 years. You know, whether I was at an independent shop or at the dealership, that was just my forte. That's what I know, that's what I do. Like I tell you guys in various videos, you know, I'm a mechanic above all else, you know. I don't consider myself a diagnostician. I can diag some things very lightly, but a lot of the time I need help kind of going down the right electrical path, if you will. For me, I'm more of a nuts and bolts kind of guy, and I can pretty much get myself in and out of almost any jam that I ever run into. And we're going to talk about that too, because we've all been there, you know, where you start getting into a repair, you get it all put back together, and next thing you know, something's happening. There's like a poor connection on a fuel injector, and you can't quite get to it without pulling the intake back off. So you got to shut it down, rip things back apart, go in there, push that connector back down, you know, or maybe it was a vacuum line that you left loose or something like that, or maybe you get it all taken apart and you put it all back together and then something completely different happens, which I don't even know how the gremlin factor comes into play. But like I had this one car, I must have taken the intake off like 3 or 4 times So it came in, it had a lean coat, and what it came down to was that the smoke test would reveal that the lower intake and plenum gaskets were leaking, so I went to replace them. And then something completely different outside of my fault, one of the injector seals started to leak in the front. Then the back one started to leak. Then one of the injectors took a shit, so we had to change that out. Then a different injector started to leak. And before you knew it, we were replacing all the seals in the injectors, one injector plus the intake gaskets. So, yeah, I mean, we've all been there, guys. Sometimes you just got to take things apart and put them back together, but you get faster at it, and you learn all the little tricks and tips and things you don't have to take off, and it just seems to work itself out. But we've all been there. It's happened. Another thing is old cars versus new cars. How many times have you come into contact with an old car where just simply the nut or the bolt is so rusted that maybe that stud or that bolt breaks, or that nut won't come off, or the nut was really rounded, so you have to spend extra time in using extractors to get it off, so that takes extra time. And next thing you know, all these things are contributing to the time factor, so your hours can dwindle as a result, right? So whether it's a small job or a big job, these are factors that come into play while you're on the job and working. So the biggest thing that I can think of that was like a defeater at the dealership level would definitely have to be the warranty factor, because warranty never wanted to pay you more than half the time that customer pay was. So if customer pay for a job, let's say paid 10 hours to remove a cylinder head, warranty department was only going to pay you 5. Some guys get quick enough to where it takes them maybe like 6 or 4.5. It depends. How many are you doing within a week? How many did you do during the month? And you just progressively get faster. You get to the point where you start memorizing all the torque specs, all the special tools, and you can just go and grab it and just boom, 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 and get it all done. But you still run into situations, like I said, where the inevitable happens. You know, the gremlin monster comes in and starts tinkering with your project, and next thing you know, it kills your hours. It's just one of those things. And then that's where the guys that are favored in the shop or what have you, or the ones that are not quite certified, and we'll get into certification stuff later, they'll get a lot of the more, we'll call them small jobs or easier jobs, as far as flushes and oil changes and rotations and tires and alignments and brakes and so forth, because they're not quite certified enough to be able to take on that level requirement of warranty work. So that's a huge factor. So while they might be kicking butt in management's eyes because they have all these hours racked up from all the gravy work, you might be getting frowned upon, but in some cases, management might actually favor you too, because you are one of the only ones getting the work, the heavy line work, in and out during a certain time frame. So I think it was looked at both ways. You know what I mean? I never really had my balls busted too much by management or my shop foreman for lack of hours. You know, they were pretty chill about it because I was one of the faster heavy line techs within the shop. So it worked out well for me because I was in that favoritism factor, so that worked out well. But I'm just letting you guys know how that whole hours thing works between big jobs and small jobs. So now going over to the independent shop, way different, okay? Because like I said, it's very family-oriented atmosphere and everything else. But aside from that, all the little jobs that we have, because everything is now CP, and it's very rare that you get a warranty job. Okay, very rare that you get a warranty job, and usually it means that we've already performed the work once and something happened and now we have to do it again. But it's very rare. Usually it's because of a failed part or something like that we got from Napa. But what happens is that like now that everything is CP at the indie shop and you're not having to worry about the warranty factor, the hours kind of equal themselves out in a way, because you can have one guy kicking ass and doing struts, alignments, brakes, shocks, rotations, oil changes, etc. You could be tackling a couple of oil changes in a rotation, maybe one brake job, and then you did like a transmission and a cylinder head within that week, and next thing you know, the hours are pretty much about the same at the end of the week. But as I said in a previous video, the primary focus at the independent shop is not to try to do necessarily better than the guy next to you. It's to try to provide as much income or revenue for your shop that you work at as you physically can possibly do within that working week. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, is where before technicians and mechanics that work at like the dealership level and maybe some independent shops are more focused on themselves. At certain independent shops, it is very much focused on the shop succeeding as a whole. So I think that's a factor to take into place. Another key factor is you have to understand, if you are working on cars, whether you're at a dealership or an independent shop, you don't know everything. I mean, there's a lot of guys where I see ego come into play, where they think they know it all, and they'll spend hours and hours and hours struggling to try to get something done when all it took was maybe that split-second decision to turn to the guy to your left or the guy to your right and say, hey, can you help me out here? I'm not really sure what's going on. I've been trying to, mess with this component. It wasn't coming off. I've tried a few different things. You got any kind of ideas or tricks on, am I just weak or what's going on here? And let somebody else come over. Maybe all it takes is that extra set of hands or that extra set of eyes to come over, and bloop, next thing you know, it's off and you can proceed with the rest of the job. So don't let ego get in the way, because that can affect your hours too, especially if you're trying to produce hours for the shop or for yourself or whatever. You can't know everything. You're always going to run into some kind of snag, you know what I mean? And shit happens too. That's another thing. Parts hold. You could be working on something, get it all ripped apart, you got it done super quick, and next thing you know, you're waiting on parts. And parts hold could take anywhere from a few hours to a couple days. So next thing you know, it's sitting off on the back line, and this happens to me all the time. Doesn't matter if it's at the dealership or the independent shop, it's the same thing, both ways. Parts are difficult to get a hold of, especially depending on the frequency in which they're used. So if a certain component is utilized more than, 3 or 4 times within that month, it might take 3 or 4 days to come back from, New Jersey or Europe or whatever in order to get that part in. Or sometimes it might need to be ordered online. Maybe the only way you can get that part, because the vehicle's so old, is to order it off of eBay or Amazon, and you're hoping to get it a used component that's a close match to it because the parts store doesn't sell it anymore. So sometimes you're on a parts hold and there's nothing you can do about that. So it's all part of the game, guys. So if you're really focused on hours, or you're struggling with hours, do not be too focused on the hour part. Just be focused on the quality of work that you're trying to produce, and understand that you cannot there's always going to be a situation where you cannot predict what's going to happen next. You know what I mean? And if your hours slide one week, that's okay. Maybe you make it up the next week. You know what I mean? Or the week after, depending on how everything unfolds. And you will eventually get quicker at whatever it is that you're doing, whether your constant focus is diagnostics or your constant focus is heavy line. You will get progressively faster the more and more you do it. You'll get more organized, you'll have a system, you'll have a flow, and motivation will come. So don't worry about it. But at any rate, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go for now. I've got a couple other video topics that I want to pull up, and then for this evening, and then this weekend, my major focus is going to be the scan tool video that I want to do for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoy the content so far. I hope a lot of this is helping out the new guy, or the DIY, or the dealership tech, or entry-level tech that's coming into play. I hope my information that I'm giving you guys is really helping. I really do. That's all I got for this video, guys. Thanks again for watching. As always, cheers to those of you that have your beers, and we'll see you next video. Deuces.